While on a trip to Australia with her best friend, a 17-year-old girl suddenly vanished without a trace. The police and her family were left wondering what had happened to her for 18 years, despite the thorough search for her and the numerous witnesses that came forward. One shocking fact emerged when this terrible mystery was finally unraveled. The police had all the information they needed to wrap up the investigation quickly, but their carelessness and lack of professionalism caused it to take almost 2 decades. In today's video, I will narrate the story of what happened to Hayley Dodd. But before we dive in, I just want to say you are welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more crime cases. Hayley Dodd was born in the United Kingdom on the 30th of November 1981 to Raymond and Margaret Dodd. She grew up in a fairly large, close-knit family with 5 other siblings. When Hayley was younger, in the year 1990, she and her whole family immigrated to Australia, settling in the village of Mandorah. Throughout her elementary, middle, and high school, Hayley Dodd was an excellent student. She participated in sports and had intentions to further her studies. She wanted to become either a veterinarian or a school teacher. However, before making a final choice for a career, Hayley wanted to go on an adventure, exploring the whole of Australia. For this reason, at the age of 17, when she obtained her high school diploma, she and her best friend Lisa left on a trip to Western Australia. Their goal was to spend a few months away from home, rather than just driving through nearby towns and tourist hotspots. The 2 friends planned to look for temporary jobs while traveling in order to pay for their living expenses, which included food and transportation. They planned to enjoy their vacation by hitchhiking within cities in Australia, which at the time didn't seem like a risky idea. 1 out of 100 young women were being killed while hitchhiking at the time, but given how many people did so safely, there was no widespread fear sparked by these crimes. Hayley Dodd was certain that even with a friend by her side, her parents would forbid her from traveling by hitchhiking. She then assured them that she would be taking the bus instead. In July 1999, Hayley and Lisa traveled to a place called Dongara. They already had a part-time job where they would work as day laborers on a nearby farm there. They were residing at a camping ground where they got a space to sleep for the night in exchange for a small fee. These camping grounds are very popular in Australia, primarily due to their low prices. A few days before starting work, Hayley made the decision to use the rest of her free time to travel to a family friend's farm near Moora. She had once been there and wanted to visit them after a long time. She planned to hitchhike to the farm, but Lisa was reluctant to let her leave alone. Hayley insisted that she need not worry and would return soon. As a parting gift, Lisa gave Hayley herself a defense folding knife and some cash so she could call her from the phone booth. On the 29th of July, at around 8 a.m., Hayley left the camping site and headed towards the farm. Meanwhile, at the farm, family friends were expecting and waiting for her, but she never showed up. Being concerned, they decided to inform her mother. Margaret Dodd immediately called the police out of concern that something might have happened to her daughter. She first dialed the 000 emergency number and explained the situation at hand. After hearing her story, the operator concluded that there was nothing urgent about the situation. She, however, told Margaret to go file a missing person report at the nearby police station, which she did. Going through the timeline of events of that day, the detectives started looking for Hayley. They started off by going to the campsite where Lisa was staying. After being told why they were there, Lisa was shocked to learn that Hayley never made it to the farm. She was able to provide the police with a detailed description of each outfit Hayley wore on that particular day, as well as a sketch of the earring Hayley was wearing. She had purchased these earrings a few days prior to her disappearance. She was drawn to the piece of jewelry when she and Lisa went shopping to treat themselves to some inexpensive items. Hayley had no idea that those earrings would hold the key to unlocking the terrible mystery of her disappearance at the time. Investigators released details regarding the missing teenager, including her description. Despite being almost 18-year-old, Hayley appeared much younger. She stood at 152 centimeters tall and weighed a little over 40 pounds. As the investigation progresses, the first witness was easily found by the police. It happened to be the truck driver who had given her a ride that day. According to the man, Hayley had reportedly knocked on his truck's window at a gas station and requested a ride to a place called Mora, where the farm was. Although the trucker was en route to another farm, he agreed to give her a ride for the majority of the distance. She was later dropped off by the man above 50 kilometers from Mora, close to the town of Ashangara. He further reported that Hayley had been in a cheerfully good spirits, talking about her trip the entire way. He had also given her $15 to get something to eat after she said she was running low on cash. In case she needed a ride back, he also left her his phone number. Since he traveled that road almost all the time, he wouldn't have minded giving her another ride. Detectives later received a number of calls from witnesses who claimed to have seen Hayley in the vicinity. The police eventually came to the conclusion that Hayley had been walking on foot along the northwest road towards Mora, based on the witnesses' testimony. Evidently, she was unable to hitch a ride from a driver at the gas station. As a result of that, she then made the decision to walk alongside the road in an effort to hitch a ride. Another witness claimed that he gave Hayley a ride to the Winjardi Road turnoff before she continued walking towards her destination. The following witness was a female driver who was passing by. She caught sight of Hayley just as she was getting out of another car and walking towards Mora. More than 10 witnesses in total called the police. Detectives came to the conclusion that Hayley was last seen at around 11:45 a.m. on the Northwest Road, about 50 kilometers from Mora. However, there was another witness who, despite not having seen Hayley, nonetheless told the police something unsettling. According to the man, his engine was overheating, so he stopped on the side of the Northwest Road. While fixing up his car, he briefly heard a dog barking before a female piercing scream. Since it might have been far away, he was unable to see the source of the noise. The road traveled through a barren, flat area with little background noise. Giving all of this information, the police's prognosis was disappointing from the onset. Eddie Rowe, the lead detective, decided that they should search for the body rather than think about the possibility that Hayley might still be alive. However, management forbade him from doing so. Hayley Dodd's case was left at the status of the missing person case. A murder investigation would have given the police more options than a missing person investigation, but they lacked any leads that could have helped them find Hayley, so they started looking for potential kidnappers right away. They were able to locate several local suspects in a short period of time, but the police eventually concentrated on 3 men. One of them was a teacher at a nearby school, another worked there as a part-time gardener, and the third lived close to where Hayley had disappeared. Each of them offered an alibi and pleaded not guilty when questioned. Although the police were unable to find any evidence to the contrary, they were unable to conclude with certainty that they were innocent. However, things quickly changed drastically. A neighbor of one of the suspects went to the police. He revealed to them that on the day Hayley Dodd went missing, Francis Wark, a 43-year-old school gardener, had taken his car to go shopping in Mora. Around 1 p.m. later that day, Francis came back to his house, and he noticed that inside the car had suffered damage. The dashboard had signs of an impact, and the turn signal knob was broken as well. The neighbor was unable to ask him what had happened to the car because When Francis Wark arrived home, he threw his shopping bags in the kitchen before mounting his motorcycle and leaving again. The police decided to re-interview Francis because they thought this story was strange. Francis, however, claimed that he was many miles away from the alleged location of Hayley's abduction. He claimed that after getting home, he immediately rode his motorcycle to a party in the city of Perth. He said he wasn't able to make it down there because he went over the speed limit on the way there, which resulted in a serious accident that made him go to the hospital. With the information at their disposal, the detectives were able to ask the obvious question: where was he going in such a hurry? Investigators decided to request a search warrant for his home after deciding that his own testimony was extremely strange. The police searched his home, but were unable to uncover any possible evidence. Forensics also examined the car. They searched the car and took the seat's cover off in order to examine them properly in the lab. However, all these resulted in nothing, and Francis Wark was let off the hook. Not long after that, he moved to Queensland on the other side of the country, leaving the detectives without any leads while the case was left hanging on the shelf. Detectives made attempts to move the case forward by locating fresh witnesses and evidence, but all efforts were futile. After 8 long years, in 2007, Francis Wark returned to the police radar. At that time, he was residing in a remote area of a small town. Next to his door lived an elderly couple who were relaxing one morning on their porch when they suddenly became horrified to see a young woman running in their direction completely naked and covered in blood. When she requested for help, the couple immediately called the police. The victim claimed that the previous evening she had attempted to get a ride. A man pulled up in front of her and offered to take her to wherever she was going. During the journey, the man then informed her that he had to go to one location in order to fill up his car with gas. They later pulled up to a house in the middle of nowhere where he called her inside and offered her some tea, which sadly she didn't deny. He attacked her shortly after that, and after a brief struggle, succeeded in taming and tying her up. The victim endured horrific violence and torture for the next few hours. Additionally, her attacker stole one of her earrings by ripping it off. This man was Francis Wark, as you may have guessed. In the morning, the woman realized she could run once the rope was off her hands and her legs were free. She immediately started trying hard to loose the rope. After she succeeded, she watched out for Francis Wark, waiting for him to get as far away as possible before dashing out through the back door. One smart move to note in the midst of this chaos was that the woman took off her necklace and threw it under the bed before leaving. She decided to leave some personal items in Francis's home out of concern that the police might not find any evidence to support her claim when she eventually reports him. And guess what? That single act of hers actually worked. After searching Francis' home, the police discovered the identical necklace and arrested him right away. After the trial, he quickly came to the conclusion that he could not get away with what he had done and made the decision to come clean. He then received a 12-year prison term. Although Francis' arrest was reported to the Western Australian police, who handled the Hayley Dodd's case, they showed no sign of interest whatsoever. The 8-year-old cold case, which so closely resembled the facts of Francis Wark's crime, was not revived by the police. The detectives only agreed to reopen the case at Hayley's mother's insistence. However, they quickly came to the conclusion again that Francis was still innocent in the Hayley Dodd's case, and that there was nothing they could do to change that. The police rebuffed Hayley's family's repeated requests for a thorough investigation, saying that they had already done everything within their power. Hayley's relatives spent tens of thousands of dollars on private investigators in a futile attempt to wait for law enforcement assistance. It was 6 long years before the case changed course. It was discovered in 2013 that the police had simply forgotten about the evidence, which ultimately proved to be the key to cracking the case. Tracy Horan, a medical examiner, submitted a request to reopen the Hayley Dodd's case. The reason was that the exact same car seat covers that had been taken from Francis' neighbor's vehicle in 1999 had been discovered in the evidence storage. Unexpectedly, it happened that for 14 years, no blood, DNA, or other forms of evidence had ever been tested on the seat covers. When the forensics went through the covers more thoroughly this time, they discovered a woman's earring that had become tangled in the material. Detectives went back to the drawings Lisa drew for the police shortly after her friend vanished. They came across the drawing of the earrings Hayley was wearing that day and were shocked to see that it was the same earring found in the covers of the car's seat. Experts also found a human hair that had been removed from the car's mats. DNA sample was taken from the hair, and it matched Hayley Dodd's mother's DNA. That implied that the hair was almost certainly Hayley's. However, the likelihood was not 100%, making it very challenging to bring charges against Francis as soon as possible. As soon as the information reached the media, the police came under heavy fire. This evidence was right under the investigators' noses for 14 years, but during that time, they never remembered it. Naturally, such a discovery altered the course of the investigation, and the detectives traveled to another region of the country to question Francis once more. Francis Wark was still serving a jail term at the time for assaulting a woman in 2007. He told the detectives the same story that he had told them 14 years earlier. He denied being involved in the murder and insisted that he was out shopping in Mora when Hayley Dodd was kidnapped. The nearly 4-hour-long interrogation produced no results, so the police were forced to get the case ready for trial. He wasn't officially charged with Hayley's murder until 2015, at which point he was deported to Western Australia. The trial started in late 2017. All of the evidence presented, according to Francis' defense, was circumstantial. His defense claimed that the earrings Hayley Dodd purchased were both inexpensive and popular. Therefore, another woman might have left it in the car. Although not an exact match, the hair in the car showed a 100% match to Hayley's DNA, though it would have been extremely unlikely to make a mistake here. That was sufficient for the attorneys, but the judge didn't find any of these arguments convincing. If Francis' crime from 2007 hadn't occurred, perhaps he would have still had a chance to escape punishment. However, he did more than just abducting the hitchhiking woman. He also stole her earring. The prosecution's theory that the man was hoarding the victim's earrings as trophies ultimately raised more questions about him. As a result, the judge sentenced him to 21 years in prison after finding him guilty of kidnapping and killing Hayley Dodd. All of these occurred while his prior sentence was still being processed. Francis Wark was sentenced at age 62, but the story did not end there. The jury was of the opinion that Francis abducted, killed, and then hid Hayley's body, which was never discovered. Francis also refused to admit to his crimes. In 2018, Hayley's mother worked to pass a new law that states murderers are not eligible for parole if they refuse to reveal the location of their victim's body. Hayley's mother repeatedly asked the killer to reveal where he hid her daughter's body, but he refused. 2020 saw the occurrence of another notable occasion. Francis's appeal to have his sentence overturned was accepted by the court, and a new hearing was scheduled. His attorneys continued to argue that he would not have had time to abduct Hayley Dodd between his trip to Mora and his return home. However, the court stated that the time span gave him well enough chance to do so, especially given the haste with which he arrived home and immediately left for Perth on his motorcycle. Even though the hair and the earring were still considered to be two of the most important pieces of evidence against him, Francis was still successful in having his sentence reduced. The court reduced his sentence from 21 years to 18 years after finding him guilty of involuntary manslaughter. But because of a law that was passed in 2018, he would still be unable to leave prison if he refused to say where he hid Hayley Dodd's body. The detectives continue to be busy because of another aspect of the entire case. They are confident that Francis has victimized numerous additional women, and that none of them have been able to escape his wicked ways. This psychotic man may have been offering pretentious rides to young women on the streets for years. Only he knows what happened to them. The disappearance of a woman in late 2005 was one of the most likely comparable cases. She had hitchhiked to another city and had vanished without a trace. Because Francis knew the victim personally, the detective in charge of the case is certain that he abducted her, but there is currently no evidence to pin him to the crime. It might turn up again in the police's evidence room a few years down the road, but that wouldn't matter to the criminal. Francis would have been charged for the murder of Hayley Dodd in 1999 if the police had conducted a more thorough inspection of the car. We currently have no way of knowing how many lives he destroyed in the years that followed, but sooner or later, the mystery may be unraveled. This entire story has another unsettling aspect. Do you recall that the police named 3 main suspects, including Francis, during the preliminary stages of the investigation? 5 months after Hayley Dodd vanished, one of the suspects killed his wife. The second, who worked as a teacher, ended up being among the worst child predators in Australian history. Unfortunately, the police were powerless to stop them at the time of Hayley's murder before they could harm someone else. Here ends today's crime story. Don't forget to support the channel by giving this video a like and leaving a comment of what you think about the case. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe.